From Night Train Lane's face masks to the hip drop they just banned, the NFL keeps changing what defenders are allowed to do when they tackle. Dick Night Train Lane was the most feared cornerback in football during the 50s and 60s, and his signature move was grabbing receivers by the face mask and twisting them into the ground. Lane's hit on Rams running back Jack Arnett put the issue in full view. The face mask tackle knocked Arnett unconscious right there on the field. By the standards of his era, Lane saw it as a way to bring the guy down. The rulebook had nothing to say about it. The NFL added the face mask penalty in 1962 because players like Lane used the face mask to control and drag opponents down. The original rule came with a split penalty where an incidental grab cost the defense 5 yards and a flagrant twist or pull cost 15. That split lasted for almost 5 decades, and it created a weird gray area where officials had to guess intent on every single grab. Then, in 2008, the league removed the 5-yard version entirely. Every face mask is now a 15-yard personal foul with an automatic first down. The flagrant grabs can get a player ejected on the spot. The league decided that any grab is dangerous enough for the full penalty. The face mask ban was the NFL's first major tackle restriction, and it set the template for every rule that came after it. Before we get to the next one, subscribe if you want the rules behind the hits. The clothesline tackle worked exactly the way it sounds. A defender would swing his forearm or arm at a runner's neck or head while the runner was sprinting at full speed, stopping him cold like a rope strung across the chest. It was a brutal way to stop a runner, and the NFL allowed it for its first few decades. Oakland Raiders safety Jack Tatum delivered one of the most notorious clothesline hits in league history when he caught Vikings receiver Sammy White with a forearm to the throat in Super Bowl XI on January 9, 1977. Tatum was one of the most feared hitters of his era, and the hit sent White's helmet flying, becoming one of the most replayed images in Super Bowl history. The NFL never actually wrote the word clothesline into the rulebook. Instead, it folded the tackle into the unnecessary roughness provision that the league formalized in the late 70s, which banned blows to the head and neck area, unlike the horse collar and hip drop, which each became named fouls. That choice matters during a game because officials don't hunt for a clothesline in the rulebook or announce a signal for it. They judge where the arm lands and whether the defender used it to strike the runner instead of making a real wrap. A defender can still wrap and drive through a runner's chest, even when the hit looks nasty on replay. He can't swing an arm across the throat, lead with a forearm to the helmet, or turn a tackle into a hit that cuts off the runner's balance before his body can react. The penalty lands under unnecessary roughness, the same 15-yard bucket that covers a lot of dangerous contact. That broad language gives the league room to flag new versions of an old move without adding another named foul every time defenders find an angle. It also leaves less certainty for players than the horse collar rule gives them. With a horse collar, you can identify the forbidden grab before the runner hits the grass. With a clothesline, the official judges force, placement, and whether the arm became a weapon. That judgment call drives defenders nuts, especially when slow motion makes every forearm look worse than it did at full speed. Still, the rule draws a line. Tackle the body, keep your arm away from the head and neck, and don't use a runner's momentum to whip him backward by the throat. The clothesline just got folded into unnecessary roughness. The crown of helmet rule later earned its own named restriction, and the NFL expanded it twice. Spearing was the act of lowering your head and driving the crown of your helmet into another player. Old highlights from the 60s and 70s show defenders leading headfirst into ball carriers. The NFL outlawed spearing in the late 70s as a form of dangerous helmet use, calling it unnecessary roughness with a 15-yard penalty and the possibility of ejection if the hit was flagrant. For decades, that was enough, and players mostly stopped launching themselves headfirst into opponents, at least in the obvious way the rule was designed to prevent. Then the league found a problem it hadn't touched. In 2013, the league went much further by banning all players from initiating contact with the crown of the helmet, and that included running backs. Steelers safety Ryan Clark went public with his criticism right away, saying the new rule might eliminate the tough guy from football entirely. That same 2013 offseason also abolished the tuck rule. In 2018, the NFL added a helmet lowering rule that penalized any player who dropped his head to initiate contact, going beyond just the crown of the helmet. Helmet-to-helmet restrictions became the league's most contested rules. The defenseless player rule formalized in the mid-1990s and expanded steadily for the next 2 decades. It protects receivers, quarterbacks, returners, and anyone caught in a vulnerable position from direct helmet contact to the head or neck. The rule had been on the books for years, but Week 6 of the 2010 season turned it into a real threat to defenders. A series of brutal helmet-to-helmet hits on Sunday pushed the NFL to respond before the next week's games even started. James Harrison of the Steelers drew a $75,000 fine for 2 hits. Patriots safety Brandon Merriweather was fined for a hit on Ravens tight end Todd Heap that left him motionless, while Falcons quarterback Dunta Robinson drew $50,000 for hitting Eagles receiver Deshaun Jackson in the head. Harrison alone paid more in 1 week than some players earned in a game check that season. The league wanted the fines to hurt financially. The cultural shift was real, and the old way of playing defense was going to cost players real money. ESPN's Jacked Up segment on Monday Night Countdown spent years celebrating the same hits the league now flagged and fined. Launching into a defenseless receiver, meaning a defender leaving his feet to drive his helmet or shoulder into a receiver's head or neck right after the catch, was clarified as a separate unnecessary roughness foul in the late 2000s. It draws a 15-yard penalty and can trigger fines and suspensions, especially when the defender clearly launches upward and makes contact with the head. The NFL also tightened its rules to protect quarterbacks' knees after low hits ended seasons and forced pass rushers to change how they finish a quarterback. Quarterbacks standing in the pocket are classified as defenseless players, and the NFL has spent decades building protections for them at and below the knee. The first landmark injury came in the 2005 AFC wildcard playoff game between the Steelers and the Bengals. Steelers defensive tackle Kimo von Oelhoffen, a former Bengal, rolled into Carson Palmer's left knee on Cincinnati's very first offensive play of the game. Palmer's ACL and MCL were torn on contact. Von Oelhoffen later said the knee pop sounded like a gunshot. The Bengals never recovered, and Pittsburgh went on a playoff run that ended with a Super Bowl win. The NFL tightened its rules on low hits to quarterbacks after that season. 3 years later, on September 7, 2008, Kansas City Chiefs safety Bernard Pollard hit Tom Brady's left knee while Brady was throwing from the pocket. Brady's ACL and MCL were shredded on the spot, and he missed the entire 2008 season. The NFL enacted the so-called Brady Rule for the 2009 season, and it was specific about what defenders can and can't do around a quarterback's legs. The rule requires defenders who are on the ground or falling to avoid hitting the quarterback at or below the knee if they can reasonably do so. That's the part defensive linemen can't stand. When a 300-pound defensive lineman is falling forward after a bull rush, physics doesn't always cooperate with the rulebook. The NFL treats quarterbacks as too valuable to lose to knee injuries, so defenders have to finish plays without going low. The NFL had protected quarterbacks' knees, and it had protected receivers' heads. The horse collar tackle already had its own rule, and its own section of the rulebook, a separate 15-yard foul built around the grab that wrecked legs. The horse collar tackle is a defender reaching from behind and grabbing the inside back of a runner's collar or shoulder pads, then yanking him down to the ground. The runner's legs get trapped under the defender's body weight, and the knee and ankle take the full force of two players coming down at once. It looks almost effortless when it works, and that's exactly what makes it so destructive. Roy Williams of the Dallas Cowboys injured 4 players with horse collar tackles during the 2004 season, part of at least 6 major injuries from the technique that year. The most famous victim was Terrell Owens, then playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, who suffered a broken right leg and torn ankle ligaments when Williams grabbed him from behind and dragged him down. Owens was the biggest name, but he wasn't the only one. Ravens running back Musa Smith was another victim whose season ended the same way. The NFL banned the horse collar tackle as a specific technique in 2005, and the rule carries a 15-yard personal foul with an automatic first down. It's explicitly defined in the rulebook as its own category, separate from unnecessary roughness. The rule carries Roy Williams' name for a good reason. Williams kept using the tackle even after it was banned. In December 2007, the NFL suspended him 1 game for a horse collar tackle on Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb. He had already been fined multiple times for the same offense. Changing a defender's instincts gets hard once he finds a tackle that works. The rule was expanded in 2006 to cover more grab areas, and expanded again in 2016 to include jersey grabs at the nameplate. Defenders had figured out that they could grab the jersey at the back of the nameplate and get the same effect, so the league closed the loophole. The horse collar is the closest example of one player forcing a rule change. Williams injured 4 players in a single season with the same move. The horse collar was banned after a string of visible, ugly injuries. Be a superfan for the channel and help me reach 50,000 subscribers by the start of the season. The most recent tackle ban followed a different path entirely. The competition committee used injury rate data to justify the ban, then gave owners a clear record of how often it hurt runners before the vote. The hip drop or swivel tackle works like this. A defender wraps the runner, swivels his hips, unweights himself, and drops onto the runner's legs at or below the knee. It looks normal for a split second until the defender swings his hips and dumps his weight onto the runner's lower body. Then the league ran the numbers, and owners didn't debate. The NFL's own injury data showed that hip drop tackles were 20 to 25 times more likely to cause injury than standard tackles. The league studied the data and found that a runner caught in a hip drop is far more likely to leave the field on a cart than one brought down with a standard tackle. Tony Pollard suffered a high ankle sprain and a fractured fibula in the 2022 divisional round against the 49ers on a hip drop tackle, and the injury was visible enough that the entire country watched him get carted off the field during a playoff game. Ravens tight end Mark Andrews suffered a similar injury the following season. People started calling the hip drop the cousin of the horse collar because of the way it traps the runner's legs, and the comparison to the Roy Williams rule stuck immediately. NFL owners unanimously banned the hip drop tackle in March 2024 for the upcoming season. The penalty is a 15-yard personal foul plus an automatic first down. But the league made the enforcement deliberately strict. Officials must see 3 specific indicators before throwing a flag. The defender must wrap the runner, swivel and unweight his body, and land on the runner's legs at or below the knee. All 3 have to be present, or there's no flag. That standard separates a banned swivel and drop from ordinary tackles, where a defender slides down after losing his grip. It also created major problems on the field during the 2024 season. In real time, it's extremely hard to tell the difference between a hip drop tackle and a normal tackle where a defender's momentum naturally carries him to the ground. The problem is that when you wrap a runner and your body weight takes you down, there's no clean way to stop yourself from landing on his legs. Defensive players pushed back hard on the ban during the 2024 season, and that pushback is still going on right now. The hip drop ban shows the NFL acting on injury data before one ugly play forces its hand. Hit subscribe, smash that like button, and let me know in the comments which banned tackle surprised you the most.